Malmros here, Senior Director of Vault Training at Veeva Systems. Once again, joined by my good friend, Graham O'Keefe, founder and CEO of Learnaboutgmp, certainly one of the premier e-learning content providers in the life sciences industry. We're continuing our conversation around the relationship between e-learning technologies and e-learning content libraries and how life sciences companies should think about procuring, deploying, and succeeding with those different assets. Graham, I want to jump in, and we've talked a lot about in our relationship, making sure that companies, and particularly companies that use Vault Training, are getting a Part 11 compliant, quality GXP-oriented LMS that can help with, for example, control document training. But as those companies mature, they want to add content libraries so that they can make their life easier, so that they can cover more ground. For those emerging life sciences companies, when do they know the right time to license a content library? When do you hear from those companies in their maturity?
Well, we hear from them pretty quickly when they realize that their training departments can't actually do what we do. Because typically what happens in a training department is, they're so busy doing the day-to-day activities of actually managing, in-house training, example, updating SOPs, making sure everybody's trained on the right version of the SOP and all that stuff that comes with working in a busy training department in a life science company. So somebody comes and they go, listen, we have this new topic, data integrity is out there. Everybody needs to know about data integrity, awareness, et cetera, et cetera. What can we do to roll out, compelling training to our workforce to upskill them in this area? And then it goes back to the training department and they sit down and they go, okay, we need to create now a whole course on data integrity, but we don't have the skill set in-house in our training department to do that. So how do we actually get the SME to write the content initially? So they'll have to go out to various departments within the organization and try and find somebody to develop this content. And that's always a difficult task because you have everybody within the organization doing their day-to-day anyway. So you're giving somebody the extra task then of developing, content around a certain subject. And it's not a given that that person will actually understand the topic well enough to develop the content. So if you get to that point and you develop the content, you have to ensure then that this content is aligned with regulations, aligned with standards, aligned with guidelines, and it's content that's going to make a difference when it's rolled out. Okay, so that's one aspect. But then you have a content, okay, you have a Word document with content in it. What does that mean? How do you get it out there? So next thing you need to figure out is how I'm going to project manage this to develop an e-learning course. So now you have to talk to instructional designers, you have to talk to voiceover artists, you have to talk to wireframing guys, and somebody to project manage this whole thing, okay? And this is on top of your day-to-day job. So, I think from that example, it's pretty clear that if you want to do one course, it's going to take a long time. But if you want to actually create a library, I don't know how you're going to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for all the times that I've thought about this problem, you framed it in a different way for me. And of course, it makes sense that organizations who see this coming growth, right, this onslaught of training needs, will look to a single vendor that can provide technology and content because it's easier. They choose convenience over quality. But at the same time, what you just described is a really important point. As soon as you do that, you're sacrificing, as you mentioned, the need to ensure that you have the best possible solution to deliver document-centric training. And then you're also taking on the responsibility that you may not understand of either trying to figure out how to build content, or if you license potentially just a broad library that doesn't specifically meet your quality needs, trying to figure out how to deploy that library. So as you point out, the right time, or knowing when to license a content library, is when the required areas of expertise exceed your personal purview, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you dig back onto that, your expertise should be making sure that you solidify, as an emerging pharma company or a life sciences company, the ability to deliver that qualification set around control documents, and then take it stepwise and move on to figure out the best approach to go out and get a library. And obviously, it sounds like you're saying people should consider all the steps that they would take to do it internally, finding the best provider who can execute those steps with excellence as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just to build on that point, and I think this is an important point. So where Veeva would sit and where we sit, Veeva sits at really the SOP layer. So when you're getting into the nitty gritty and the real technical aspects of the different work functions, where we sit is just a little bit above that layer. And I always give the example of a company we worked with about 2 years ago, and the person in charge of the training said, we've new hires, we've people crossing over to our industry, and they gave the example of Kappa, training people on a Kappa process. So their Kappa process was, I think it was a 36-page SOP. Yeah. And they put people through like the Kappa process. And then they realized afterwards that, people crossing over, people joining, from after college, for example, didn't even know what Kappa stood for. Okay. So you're going through a technical document of 36 pages and they don't even have the background information of what the Kappa is like. So, what we did with that client is the first phase approach for training there was to go through our Kappa course, understand the basics of what a Kappa is, first of all, and then go through the specifics of the SOP in relation to the work activities of the company. So, it's kind of providing that educational layer above the SOP layer.
Right. That's right. That's really good advice. And I think the one takeaway here is at the point when you need to train on content that you can't develop internally, focus on your technology, make sure that you have everything as efficient and compliant as possible from end to end when developing the core source content, and then go out and find an extended ecosystem, a partnership that's really going to make you better. I think that's a good place for us to stop on this topic. Maybe in the next one, we'll talk about how you choose that vendor of choice. We know that you are one of those vendors, so maybe we'll ask you to look at that through an objective lens, if at all possible, like we try to do with our LMS. Graham, thanks for joining me in this one.
Thanks, Ken.